thank you very much, everybody, for joining this meeting in between sessions, the first sessions of this extraordinary Assembly of States Parties. A great warm welcome to everybody. Maybe some housekeeping rules in advance. Please keep yourself muted if you don't speak. And if you would like to join the debate after the presentations, please let know through the chat function in the WebEx so that we can follow and we can give the word to those who present themselves. Again, thank you very much for joining. It's a great pleasure to have you all. Warm word of welcome also to the Ambassador Kelly. Kevin, thank you so much for joining today. We have members of the board participating. We have colleagues of the Trust Fund participating. They'll be speaking and there'll be space for interaction. Welcome to everybody from the States Parties, delegates, those who are not occupied in other sessions around the Assembly. Just to let you know, spread the word, please. We are recording this session, so anybody who might be interested to witness this side event can do that later, and we'll be also publishing a report on this session. Welcome to Ambassador Dupuy, also from Uruguay. Thank you for joining. And with that, I would like to give the floor to the first speaker, Ambassador, one of our co-sponsors, Ambassador Kelly. And before doing that, just to mention, we have another co-sponsor, which is Sweden. And we have the Deputy Minister participating and hopefully be able to speak later in the event as well. But first, Ambassador Kelly, floor is yours. Please, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Peter. I hope everybody can see me and hear me. I'm connected through my mobile phone, so it's all very tenuous, but thank you very much and good afternoon to you and to your excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour aussi à Mama Koete. C'est agréable d'être encore avec vous, même si au format virtuel, but so I'm very happy to be here. Ireland is delighted to co-sponsor this event together with Sweden. We see it as an excellent opportunity to highlight our collective awareness of the importance of victims in the work of the International Criminal Court. And I think of our strong and continued support of the critical work of the Trust Fund for Victims. We believe that this meeting provides a great opportunity to reflect on the evolution of the Trust Fund and how it should continue to move forward next year, 2021, and in the coming years. I think that I speak for all of us when I say that the work of the Trust Fund is critical to achieving the long-term reparative justice for victims, for repairing the harms that they've suffered as a result of the crimes committed against them, and also for empowering them to rebuild their lives with dignity. The focus of the Trust Fund's work is, of course, to deliver tangible reparative value to victims and to their families and to communities. I myself witnessed the impact of this work when I led a delegation of states parties on a visit to northern Uganda in 2018. And we went with President Kwan. It was towards the start of his mandate. We saw the work of the Trust Fund firsthand, and it was an extremely valuable experience, I think, for all of the states parties that took part. I left there even more convinced about the value and the impact of the essential work being carried out by the Trust Fund to improve the lives of victims through physical rehabilitation, psychosocial care, and support for livelihood activities. The Trust Fund's workload has only increased in its lifetime, along with the number of people who benefit from the programs. And I know that 2020, despite the terrible situation that we've been in, it's been a particularly busy year, as the Trust Fund announced new rehabilitation measures in Mali, launched a pilot project under its assistance mandate in the Central African Republic, as well as 10 new assistance programs in DRC, and last month announced its intention to open an assistance program in Georgia. In this light, I think it's important to recall that the trust fund depends on voluntary contributions for its work. And I'm happy to say that Ireland makes a regular annual contribution to the fund. And although it's a voluntary contribution, we actually see it as integral, an integral element of our overall membership of the court. We believe that delivering on reparative justice will continue to be critical in the context of implementing the Rome Statute. So this year we're contributing €200,000 to the fund. 100,000 of this will be used in connection with the assistance mandate, and the balance to be used in connection with the reparations mandate. So there are, of course, challenges other than funding facing the trust fund, including how the trust fund can continue to grow its operations in the years ahead to meet the needs of an ever-increasing number of beneficiaries. And in this regard, I just wanted to mention the ongoing independent review process, which has been looked at so carefully by all organs of the court, by the states parties, and I know also by the trust fund. Ireland welcomes the report of the group of independent experts. We look forward to taking this work forward in a transparent and inclusive manner, and we stand ready to further engage in what must be a collective effort involving all the organs of the court, the states parties, and civil society. And I've been really encouraged by the level of engagement received by the group of experts when they were doing their work, but also in terms of how the report has been received, and including by the trust fund. I know that although many of the recommendations directed at the trust fund are far-reaching in nature, I have been assured that the board of the trust fund values the report and is determined to engage with it in a constructive manner. As supporters of the trust fund, we particularly welcome any recommendations to increase coordination within the court on victims' issues. And so I just wanted to use this opportunity of this event to encourage the trust fund, its board and secretariat, to outline how it proposes to respond to the various recommendations and to maintain the open and transparent lines of communication on this exercise, and indeed in all aspects of its work, its successes as well as the considerable challenges that the trust fund faces in delivering on such an ambitious agenda. So I'll conclude by saying that I hope that today we can hear some ideas on how best to support the work of the trust fund, and through it to meet the needs of countless victims of crimes that are covered by the Rome Statute. So I wish us all well in our deliberations, and without further delay, I'll hand back to Peter, and so that you can get the show on the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you, Ambassador Kelly, for your first shot for this event. It was a very strong intervention. First of all, I would like to acknowledge and appreciate on behalf of the fund the continuous and growing support that we have been receiving from Ireland, not just financially, but also politically and morally. And in regard of the last, your final words of your contribution are truly appreciated, and hopefully that will bring us forward in terms of going forward, looking at the challenges that we have, looking at the achievements that we can also present, and looking forward to have a constructive discussion on the way forward with the court, with the states parties, and with civil society. With that, I would like to pass the floor to the chair of the board of directors, who is in The Hague, Madame Mama Kwaté Doumbia. Vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup à son Excellence l'ambassadeur Kevin, mon ami, l'ami des victimes, l'ami du fond, pour avoir vraiment sponsorisé cette activité en marge de l'Assemblée des États partis. Et je remercie aussi l'ambassadrice de la Suède qui a bien voulu avoir l'intention de participer à ce processus. Au nom du conseil de direction et du secrétariat...
interpretation, please.
Mhm.
I would like to thank Ambassador Kevin Kelly for his initiative in the organization of this side event and for his kind words. I would also like to thank the ambassador of Sweden, who fully had the intention of attending this side event and for her work towards the accomplishment of our mandate.
Permettez-moi, au nom du conseil de direction et du secrétariat du Fonds au profit des victimes, d'exprimer toute ma gratitude au gouvernement d'Irlande et de Suède qui ont toujours été du côté des fonds pour soutenir nos actions de terrain, mais aussi pour plaider pour nous accompagner.
I would like, on behalf of the Board of Directors and the Secretariat of the Trust Fund, to express my utmost gratitude to the governments of Ireland and Sweden, who have always stood by our side at the Trust Fund and supported both our field and advocacy activities.
Votre Excellence, ambassadeur Kelly, je vous nomme l'ami des fonds, l'ami du Fonds des victimes. Vous avez...
Your Excellency, Ambassador Kelly, I would like to designate you as simply the friend of the fund and of the victims.
Vous avez conduit sous votre houlette en 2018 une forte délégation de vos collègues ambassadeurs en Ouganda pour visiter nos réalisations et puis plaidoyer auprès des États parties. Je vous remercie pour cet accompagnement à pouvoir remplir nos mandats pour réhabiliter les victimes.
At your initiative, and that was in 2018, you led a very powerful delegation of your fellow ambassadors to the north of Uganda to see firsthand the achievements of the fund and also to carry out advocacy amongst the other states parties. I would like to thank you for this support, which is making it possible for us to fulfill our mandates by ensuring the rehabilitation of the victims.
Nous remercions également le gouvernement de Suède, qui est l'un des plus importants bailleurs de fonds de notre institution depuis de nombreuses années.
I would also like to thank the government of Sweden, which has been one of the most generous donors or contributors to our fund for several years now.
Son intérêt à notre travail et pour les victimes prouve à suffisance son engagement à tenir ses responsabilités d'État pour la justice réparatrice au profit des victimes, mais aussi sa vision pour la solidarité à compatir aux souffrances des victimes d'atrocités de conflits qui ravagent certains pays du monde. Quoi?
Martin, your microphone is off.
Je répète, non?
Oui, s'il vous plaît, bien vouloir répéter.
Son intérêt pour notre travail et pour les victimes prouve à son engagement à tenir des responsabilités d'État pour la justice réparatrice au profit des victimes, mais aussi sa vision pour la solidarité à compatir aux souffrances des victimes d'atrocités de conflits qui ravagent certains pays du monde.
Their interest in our work is a clear proof of the solidarity that they show to ensure that there is a reparative justice for the victims and also to show clear solidarity and empathy for the suffering of the people in countries in which havoc is being wreaked by conflicts around the world.
Merci donc à tous ceux qui sont autour de la table pour suivre cet événement et aussi pour nous accompagner dans cet exercice qui va consister à travailler, à écouter nos problèmes, nos réalisations, nos ambitions, surtout notre voie que nous voulons emprunter en 2021.
I would like to thank all those who are present here today to support us in our work and to listen to what we have planned for our activities, to accompany us in the coming year, and especially to discuss our roadmap for the plans we have for 2021.
Nos échanges porteront sur la perspective de 2021, tout en espérant que la COVID-19 pourra être maîtrisée en temps avec les plus grands défis de l'humanité. Nos échanges porteront sur la perspective de 2021, tout en espérant que la COVID-19 pourra être maîtrisée en tant que le plus grand défi de l'humanité.
Our discussions shall focus on our vision, our perspective for 2021, while we hope that COVID-19 would have been brought under control, given that it has been one of the greatest challenges that humanity has ever had to face.
En ce temps, le coronavirus, les victimes continuent de souffrir doublement par manque de soins adéquats et de soutien continu. Cependant, nonobstant les risques encourus, les représentants du fonds sont restés attentifs avec les partenaires de mise en œuvre pour soutenir les victimes. Nous leur disons ici bravo et merci.
In these COVID times, the victims continue to suffer on a double front, given that there is lack of adequate treatment and sustainable support. However, notwithstanding the risks being faced, the representatives of the Trust Fund for Victims are focused alongside our implementation partners on supporting the victims. And we take the opportunity here to tell them well done and thank you.
Cette année, nous avons tenu plus de 10 réunions par le Conseil et le secrétariat. Tout ça pour prouver que nous sommes engagés sur ces questions et que nous comprenons qu'il est plus que jamais nécessaire de donner le courage et l'espoir à des victimes pour qu'ils puissent vivre dans la dignité.
This year, we have held more than 10 meetings. That is the fund and the board of directors. And this is in order to show the victims that there is hope for them. And we are going to take into consideration all the proposals and recommendations that have been made so that their welfare can be improved and that they can live in dignity.
Voilà, nous avons pris en compte surtout les recommandations des experts indépendants et des évaluateurs pour l'intégrer dans notre plan stratégique.
In particular, we took into consideration the recommendations of the independent experts and the assessors, which we have duly integrated into our strategic plan.
Nous donnons donc la parole au directeur exécutif et à son staff qui vont nous donner beaucoup d'informations sur les programmes, le plan stratégique, l'état des lieux de nos ambitions, les défis et surtout les nouveaux paradigmes que nous intégrons dans notre travail futur.
And at this point, I would like to hand over the floor to the executive director and to his staff, who will provide ample information, particularly on our programs, our strategic plan, the current situation, the roadmap ahead, the challenges, and also particularly the new paradigm that we are going to integrate into our future work.
Merci à vous, Excellence, pour tout le soutien que vous donnez au fonds.
I would like to thank you very much, Your Excellency, for all the support that you have provided to the fund.
Le soutien politique n'a jamais manqué de votre part.
We have always had the political support from your side.
Nous continuerons à espérer sur votre contribution et sur votre accompagnement. Je vous remercie.
We shall continue to hope and count on your continued support and solidarity. Thank you very much.
Peter, vous avez la parole.
Peter, you have the floor.
Merci, Mama. Merci pour votre introduction à vous-même pour le conseil.
Oui.
Thank you very much, Martin, also for your interpretation. And I will now take the floor to give a presentation about the trust fund, where we are, where we have arrived at in 2020, where we are going in 2021. And I'll also pass the floor to some of my colleagues, senior colleagues, to provide perspectives from a legal side, but also from an implementation side. I think everybody can agree that over the past year, the trust fund has been very much in the spotlight from various angles. There's been an evaluation by the independent oversight mechanism. There's been the review by the independent experts. There have been media reports. And so we think that this assembly is an excellent opportunity, this side event, for the trust fund to present a picture of where we are right now, in line with our desire to have an increased communication presence and also an increased public accountability of our activities. Starting with 2020, just a brief overview. We have increased our active program portfolio, both in reparations awards and in assistance programs, significantly, going from 6 to 29 implementation partners, which is an increase of almost 400%. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic and also security-related implementation constraints that we continue to be facing. And in doing so, we have completed complex international tenders to select the best value and the best quality of implementing partners, working very closely with the registry and using this process also to investigate, to explore how we can better align the procurement procedure at the court with the trust fund business needs. And we have been learning very important lessons in this regard going forward. We have developed activities this year in Uganda, northern Uganda, in the Eastern DRC, in Mali, in the Central African Republic, and in Cote d'Ivoire. In reparations, we are implementing reparations awards in Katanga. We've been conducting victim identification and verification processes in Lubanga and in Al-Mahdi. And in this regard, we have, and I'm saying we, that's the board of directors, has issued more than 1,000 eligibility decisions in relation to potential beneficiaries of reparations awards. We've strengthened our organizational base in The Hague and in the field with a staffing increase, effective staffing increase of 48%. And that's not counting consultants, visiting professionals and interns who make incredibly important contributions to our work as well. As was mentioned by the chair of the board, they have held, the board of directors, more than 10 remote sessions during this year, especially in the second half of this year. This has been a very, very intense process. leading to important decisions taken by the board of directors. One of them was to adopt the strategic plan, which focuses on impact and on performance, and together with the plan, an activity plan that includes also the response by the trust fund on the recommendations of the IOM evaluation. And that one has been made public, the activity plan, together with the initiative that we have taken to start publishing also the management briefs by the Secretariat to the board, their quarterly management briefs. We've published the October brief this year, and the next one will be in January 2021. And so that will provide more detailed information on a regular basis about the activities of the trust fund, both in terms of decision making, but also in terms of activities, program-related activities. And then going into next year, going into 2021, we can say that we do dispose of a expanded staff capacity, which is mobilized and energized, that we will further invest in fundraising, in communication, in monitoring and evaluation, very important as well, in a centralized audit of implementing partners, and in developing policies for gender mainstreaming and conflict sensitivity. We expect to complete the implementation of the reparations awards in Katanga and to start the complex multi-annual reparations programs in Lubanga and Al Mahdi. And we expect to finalize the identification and verification of reparation beneficiaries in these two cases, in Lubanga and in Al Mahdi. We'll be starting up assistance activities in 3 more situation countries, including in Georgia, and we'll be codifying and developing policies in the areas of fund management and investment, in donor vetting, in procurement, in data protection, communication, monitoring and evaluation, and in gender mainstreaming and conflict sensitivity. There's a lot of practice in place in all of these areas already, but we feel it's very important now to start codifying that into policies that will be robust and accompany also the strategic plan of the trust fund in the years to come. I'd like now to present, with the help of Mariana, please, a couple of slides on fund management and investment at the trust fund. The first one that you see now is a breakdown of program allocations. And this may look to be quite detailed, and I can assure you that this will be also distributed in the report later, so you can take a closer look. But what you can see here is where the allocations, as decided by the board of directors, have gone in terms of specific reparations cases, in terms of specific assistance programs, those already running in Uganda and Central African Republic, the DRC and Cote d'Ivoire, but also those who might be running next year in Georgia and in Mali and in Kenya. And so that gives you an overview and an exact breakdown of where the resources are going that have been decided already by the trust fund. We can go to the next slide. There you'll see a breakdown of assistance programs and the value of contracts that we have with implementing partners. At this moment, 1.3 million in Uganda, 1.2 million in the DRC, close to 900,000 euros in the Central African Republic, and 300,000 in Cote d'Ivoire. These are not the total value of the program, but these are the current contracted values, and we do hope to continue these programs with support of voluntary contributions and donations in the coming year. But this is the current portfolio in the assistance mandate. We can go to the next slide, please. And you'll see the same picture for the reparations awards and the contracted value with implementing partners at this moment, with the exception for Katanga, which is being directly implemented by the trust fund at a remaining portfolio of 500,000 euros. Lubanga currently contracted is 1.8, for a 5-year program that will have a total value of 8.5 million. Al Mahdi is close to 2 million with the total value of the program that should be ending up at 2.7. So what you see here is not the total value of the awards, but it's what's currently contracted with implementing partners. And the final slide is a breakdown of the reparations cases again. You'll see here how much money has been contracted, has been awarded in these cases, and how much money has already been implemented in terms of contracts. In Al Mahdi, we're at 51%. In Lubanga, we're close to 50% as well. And in Katanga, we are also at 50%. And having said that about Katanga, I can tell you in addition that the total value of the Katanga awards program has already been ensured by the board of directors. So those are the slides that I just wanted to show you here, so you have a better understanding and a bit of a picture of where the money is in the trust and where it's going, how much of it has already been locked down in contracts, but also how much money is in reserve going forward. And going back to what Ambassador Kali said this morning, just now in the beginning of this meeting, it is of great importance with the growing portfolio of the Trust Fund for Victims that we increase our fundraising activities, we increase our revenue, so as to be able to continue funding reparations programs, those who are current and those who may come in the future, as well as assistance programs. I'd like now to turn to the strategic plan 2020-2021, which has been mentioned already by Chair of the Board, Mama Kwete Doumbia. The final version of that plan was accepted and adopted by the board in July and August of this year. But I perhaps should mention that a first draft was already reviewed by the board in August 2019 and approved in March 2020. The final version integrates the response of the fund to the IOM evaluation, and particularly in the activity plan, which was made public in between, as well as the operational response that we have developed to the COVID-19 pandemic over the past year. The Trust Fund strategic plan aligns in its end date with the ICC strategic plan, and the next iteration will be fully aligned as well, so that we're following the same strategic cycle as the court is doing. A major foundation for the strategic plan of the fund is the notion of responsibility to repair, which defines the interventions by the Trust Fund in relation to the primary responsibilities of other actors to repair harm suffered by victims. In reparations, obviously, that is the convicted person who is liable to pay for reparations in the first place. In the assistance mandate, we relate to the primary responsibility of a state to repair the harm suffered by victims of ICC crimes on its territory. And I'll explain a bit more later how that works in practice. The two main strategic goals now of the Trust Fund for Victims center around impact and performance. And they're both linked to separate funding streams. The assessed contributions going to the Secretariat, linked to the performance of the Trust Fund as an institution of the Rome Statute. The voluntary contributions and donations and fines and forfeitures as issued by the court relate to the impact that we may achieve for the benefit of victims, both in reparations and in assistance. And we define impact in terms of reparative value for victims as an expression of justice. If the Rome Statute defines international criminal justice as an international public good, its impact in terms of reparative justice must be understood in terms of value that is delivered locally to victims and to their families and their communities. And that is one of the foundations of the strategic goal of impact that is adopted in the strategic plan of the Trust Fund for Victims. Now let me turn to the issue of organizational capacity and performance at the Trust Fund. And Mariana, if we can have the slide, the organizational structure. And again, it may be difficult to read, and we'll be making this available in a document, but this gives you a brief overview of the Secretariat. You will see the Board of Directors to your left, and to the right, you will see the program teams, and in the middle, you'll see the team that we have in The Hague, as well as the distribution between female and male colleagues. And I'm happy to note that we have a very healthy balance, a very healthy gender balance within the Trust Fund, and especially at its management layers. Thank you, Mariana. So what you saw in that slide is that there is a very strong delegation of program management responsibilities to the field-based teams, because that's where the action is for the Trust Fund. And at the same time, there is a very strong integration of our legal and program functions. You will also see in the overview a number of key functions that you might expect and would like to see in a multi-donor trust fund that the Trust Fund for Victims is. And these include finance, resource development, fundraising, monitoring and evaluation, and communication, although I have to say that we have not yet been able to lock into the budget of the Secretariat a very strong communication capability, and we're working on that. In terms of internal control, which has been very much the subject of scrutiny by the external auditors, we're happy to report that in 2020, the external auditor has closed 4 recommendations in relation to the internal control environment of the Trust Fund, and in particular in relation to the oversight of the Trust Fund of the activities of its implementing partners, which is one of the most important relations that we maintain at the Trust Fund. In terms of organizational development, as mentioned already, we do intend to invest significantly in policy development, including also in relation to how we manage and invest our funds. And to give an example, one element which has been developed over the past couple of months are the parameters for the assistance mandate, which needs to be linked to ICC jurisdiction, to ICC situation countries, which needs to depend on a harm-based and victim-centered assessment of the situation, which needs to be based on the notion of complementarity to state action, that we're not replacing or displacing any activity that must be undertaken by the state, that we add value to other actors, so to assess the comparative investment value of our programs, that we are sensitive in the areas of gender and conflict, and of course that we need to have a funding outlook that is solid enough from current and prospective resources. So these are elements that we have used in the past year to advise the board and to recommend the board on the continuation of current programs, as well as the adoption of new assistance programs in other situation countries. It's been extremely valuable to have these discussions along these parameters, and they will be codified into a policy going into next year. In terms of organizational performance, as mentioned again already by Ambassador Kelly, the interdependence that the Trust Fund has with the court is extremely important, and this regards in particular, obviously, the registry, not only the registrar himself in his advisory capacity to the board of directors, and also supporting the executive director, myself, but more broadly as well. But I can give you one example which has been really important and outstanding this year, which was the creation of a joint procurement task force, which helped to understand, well, first of all, it helped to unblock and to push through a couple of very complex and really important tender procedures at the Trust Fund relating to the selection of implementing partners for both reparations awards and for assistance programs. But it also helped this task force to understand the need to adapt the procurement process to the business needs of the Trust Fund. And this engagement by the registrar himself personally, by his senior staff, together with senior staff of the Trust Fund, has been incredibly rich and rewarding this year, and is still continuing. I'd like to end on the topic of delivery, which is the end game, obviously, of what the Trust Fund is about. Even if we don't implement our activities, and I believe to say it's important to say that the implementation of the reparations awards in Katanga is more the exception, direct implementation by the Trust Fund, than the rule. We do depend on implementing partners, and to be able to do that, we need to have an optimal core capacity at the Trust Fund. We need to have optimal synergy with the court, as mentioned already, with the registry of a functional nature in terms of assistance and in terms of advice, but a substantive synergy, obviously, also with the judiciary in terms of the design and implementation reparations awards. That is a very, very important relationship between the Trust Fund and the court that we need to maintain and that we are investing significantly in. We do depend on the capabilities of locally based implementing partners because they ensure delivery. And our role here of our program managers is to ensure quality control, to ensure proper reporting of results, and to ensure that amongst themselves they do networking and cooperation so that we don't have singular contracts with implementing partners only, but we work with a network of partners that is mutually reinforcing each other. To be able to deliver on this as the Trust Fund, we need to match our own delivery capacity. And that means the Trust Fund Secretariat, but also our implementing partners, with the ambitions that we have for program investment. And I can tell you this has been a continuous discussion within the Secretariat and together with the board. What can we carry as a fund in terms of capacity in relation to program implementation, in relation to fund management, in relation to fundraising? What is a proper balance between ambition and capacity to go forward? And that is bound to be a very important discussion going on that needs to be had within the fund, obviously, but also with the states parties and with the court. And finally, what is important for us is the context in which we deliver. We have been forced to negotiate very challenging operational circumstances. Everybody is aware of the COVID-19 pandemic, how it is impacting us meeting here this week, but also our programs in the field quite significantly. But we mustn't forget that our programs and activities are also implemented in areas where conflict is still ongoing or still quite recent, and which in and by itself is posing very, very challenging circumstances. And that is in northern Mali, that is in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and that's in the Central African Republic, to give you a couple of examples. These are not easy theaters for the Trust Fund and its partners to work in. We remain committed for the sake of reparative justice and reparative value to victims to be active with our partners. And what you'll be hearing later from my colleagues is how we have been doing that and what kind of flexibility have we been able to build in our operations to keep on going and to keep engaged with the victims and to keep delivering. But before going there, I would like to go to one of my colleagues, a recent colleague, Ms. Francisca Ackermans, who joined the Trust Fund in the important position of legal advisor and deputy to the executive director 6 months ago. Didn't run away yet, which is a positive sign, I would say. I have a question for you, Francisca. Perhaps you can answer. Can you speak to us about the Trust Fund for Victims' role in implementing reparations with a particular focus on the identification and verification of victims? And in doing so, can you tell us a little bit about your experience at the Secretariat? Floor is yours, Francisca.
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. After now having served for 17 years at the ICC and at hybrid courts dealing with victims' participation and also with reparation awards from very many different perspectives, I'm really delighted to now be part of the body created under the Rome Statute that can actually bring reparations to victims. even if the convicted person is indigent. To my knowledge, it's the only international body that can, in fact, implement judicial reparations and provide reparative value to victims. In my view, this body has been created to give states the chance and the opportunity to financially support the implementation of reparations. Insofar as they and other donors do, the board of directors of the trust fund has the task to decide within their discretion to complement a reparation award. This decision is then the basis for the trust fund to implement a reparation award, at least if there are no funds of the convicted person for that purpose. To now turn to your question, Peter, the interaction with victims, we must make a clear distinction between the participation of the victims in trial and reparation proceedings leading up to a reparation award and the role of victims in the implementation of such a reparation award. What are these different roles of the victims? First, they are participants in the trial proceedings, but they are then parties to the reparation proceedings that end with the reparation order. They have the right to appeal the reparation order, and they have done so in the past. Victims may become beneficiaries of reparation awards. They may become so by decision of the trial chamber at the time the trial chamber issues the reparation orders. For example, in the case of Katanga, the trial chamber directly determined itself that 297 victims will be beneficiaries of the individual and collective awards. Where the trial chamber doesn't make such a determination, the victims become potential beneficiaries. The regulations of the trust fund and appeals chamber jurisprudence has set the scene for how the proceedings will be, what proceedings will have to be pursued when, in order to determine how a victim becomes a beneficiary in that respect. For individual reparation awards, that is, awards that are for the benefit of a specific individual and then arguably enforceable by a state, the trust fund identifies potential beneficiaries, and the board of directors of the trust fund determines whether they are eligible to be a beneficiary of an individual reparation award. This decision is subject to judicial review by a trial chamber. 2020 was a year of extensive eligibility decisions taken by the board of directors. In the Al-Mahdi case, the board of directors, with Gotcha Lord Kipanidze in the lead, issued 655 decisions. In the Lubanga case, the board of directors with Mama Koité Doumbia in the lead issued 522 decisions. For collective reparation awards, the eligibility is a bit different. It can be carried out by the implementing partners of the trust fund. We will proceed in that way for the implementation of collective awards in the Al-Mahdi case. We consider at this moment in time that this may be a very time and resource efficient way to determine beneficiaries at a larger scale. We will monitor and report to all of you about this process. Lastly, victims and their legal representatives have a crucial role and are extensively consulted by the trust fund in the design of the implementation plan and are being heard by the chamber that monitors the implementation process. The legal team meets regularly, partly on a weekly, but usually on a monthly or 2-monthly basis, the legal representatives of the relevant victim teams. In addition, the legal team works on a daily basis with the legal representatives teams when interviewing potential beneficiaries. One of my team members just returned from a 3-week mission in Bamako, Mali, where she and the legal team of the legal representative jointly collected 300 application forms of descendants of the saints who were buried in the destroyed mausoleums. A total of 1,007 files over the past year. Another team member interviewed, together with the legal representatives of the victims in Lubanga, a total of in Lubanga, we have now a total of 629 files of potential beneficiaries that have been transmitted to the trust fund. Peter, I hope this answers your question. Considering that I only joined 6 months ago, I would like to add that it's been a great and intense experience working with the trust fund and a multicultural and extremely committed team that is here. And I look forward to continuing on this road. Thank you.
Thank you, Franziska, for your perspective and your views and your appreciation of working at the Trust Fund. And it's indeed quite intensive, but quite rewarding at the same time. And I would like now to go to one of my colleagues who is in the field. Aude, are you online? Just to see if we can get your perspective, please. You've been actively involved in setting up assistance and reparations programs in Mali and Cote d'Ivoire this year. Can you describe how, as a program manager, you addressed the parallel initiatives of assisting reparations to victims in both those states?
Thank you, Peter. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to address you today. So maybe a step back to talk about Mali. So in Mali, the Trust Fund is operating first through its reparation mandate in the Al-Mahdi case. Al-Mahdi has been convicted for the destruction of protected buildings in Tombouctou, and reparation have been ordered. Reparations are made of individual and collective reparation with rehabilitation measures, financial compensation, as well as some symbolic measure of reparation. We are facing a number of challenges in Mali. The first one is access and security. As you know, Mali is facing a difficult security situation with a conflict still ongoing. So for us, the most challenging part was to access Tombouctou and to access the victim. We managed to do it 3 times, to go to Tombouctou, and it was very important for us in order to meet with the victims, to meet with the leaders, to meet with the authority, explain the reparation order, explain how we'll be working, and consult with victims to ensure that the work we will be doing with them will be meaningful. The second big challenge was the mainstreaming of gender. The judge made it very clear that women should benefit of the reparation equally to the men. And so even if the territory of the mausoleum of this protected building is considered as a male territory, we engage intensively with community for them to allow us to work with women, to identify some female leader and ensure that women have access to the information, access to reparation, be able to submit a claim, as well as will benefit from the reparation. And the third challenge, amongst thousands of them, would be the time, because we have a time frame to implement the reparation. But to be meaningful, the reparation needs to be owned by the victims. They need to be consulted, and they need to be left with time in order to process their trauma, in order to decide if yes or not they want to engage in the reparation process. And all of this consultation, all of this time, of this process require time before they accept to engage with us. So this is for reparation, and of course we are very mindful of the harm suffered by thousands of victims outside of Timbuktu. And without undermining how harmful was the destruction of mausoleum, we are very conscious that thousands of victims have suffered of harms directly against them. Just a number, in 2020, you had more victims in Mali than between 2012 and 2016. And most of the exactions have been committed in the center of Mali and in the north of Mali. And the fact that reparations are implemented in the Almadi case only for the community of Tombouctou was really a frustration and increased the feeling of abandonment of many of the victims. And so here you find the first complementarity between the reparation mandate and the assistance mandate, allowing the trust fund to respond to the harm of a larger number of victims than only the one targeted by the reparation order. And of course, designing our assistance mandate, we need to look at what the state is doing, because the state has the first and primary responsibility to respond to the harm. And in Mali, you have a very strong transitional process going on. The Commission Vérité, Justice, Réconciliation has been taking more than 18,000 of testimony of victims on most of the territory, and is very well known by the victims and the community. This CVJR has developed a national policy of reparation, which was presented to the international community only 3 days after the change of regime in August 2020. It's a very strong indicator to show how much the CVJR is committed to deliver reparation to the victims. And so it's very important for the Trust Fund in designing its assistance mandate, not to compete with the state, but to be complementary to the state. And for that, we engage in a number of consultations with ministry, with the CVJR, with the civil society, who have been conducted a number of activities to deliver justice to the victims, and with victims and with the community. And based on all this consultation, and based on the fact that Mali will be establishing a national commission of reparation of victims that should be operational by 2022-2023, it was decided by the board of directors to open an assistance program in Mali in order to respond quickly to the harm of victims while the state is ready to be operational and deliver reparation by himself. And so because we are working in complementarity with the state, it's very important for us to design a very strict framework in consultation again with the victim and the civil society. And we are in the process of identifying which are the key incidents that we need to respond. We need to address the harm of this key incident in order for us to respond to this harm. And then when the state will be ready to hand over to the state. In addition, we'll be working and supporting the state in order to enhance the process and ensure that the state will be able to launch its own program by 2022 or 2023. I could provide you a number of additional details, but I mean, it's important for my other colleagues to be talking to, so I will stop here, but I'm happy to provide you with details at the end of this conference or outside of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Indeed, we're running quite quickly with the time, so I'm happy that we got this information from you already, and to know indeed that you're available to meet with anybody or speak with anybody who is interested to have more. I'd like now to turn to my colleague Scott Bartel, based in Uganda, and ask him this question, because you've been having, you know, a fully fledged assistance program running in northern Uganda. It's now in its second year, in its second program cycle. Can you describe how COVID-19 impacted your work as a program manager, and especially also that the work of our implementing partners? Can you give us our experience, please, in that regard? Over to
Okay.
you, Scott.
All right, thank you, Peter. Good afternoon and greetings to everybody from Kampala. It's a pleasure to address you today concerning TFE assistance programming. Before I get to your question, Peter, I'd just like everybody to take a moment and to appreciate the magnitude and depth of trust fund assistance programming in the life of victims. I think we all should recall that from 2008, when the first assistance programs began at the trust fund, until today in 2020, more than 116,000 victims have benefited directly from trust fund assistance programs. That is surgery, that is counseling, that is livelihoods. That is more, that 116,000 victims in trust fund assistance is more than the combined number of victims that have engaged with the court through participation or investigations or as witnesses. The reach and scope of trust fund assistance is an extraordinarily good news story at the court, I must say. Now, with regards to Uganda, I'll use Uganda as an example when talking about our programming under assistance. In Uganda, more than 56,000 victims have received rehabilitation assistance. That is either surgery, counseling, or livelihood support. Victim rehabilitation and assistance are life-changing events and services provided to victims. These are not minor injuries that we are addressing. These are debilitating war and conflict injuries. Under physical rehabilitation, the Trust Fund provides plastic surgery to redress facial mutilations and disfigurement caused by torture and abuse, to redress burn victims, to remove bullets and bomb fragments in victims' bodies. We provide artificial limbs to amputees. These are important life-changing events and crucial services for victims. Under psychological rehabilitation, we provide trauma counseling to former child soldiers, survivors of sexual violence, and other members of the community who were affected by the conflict as well. As one victim recently said, counseling services help them settle their hearts and their mind so that they may deal with the rest of their life before them, to deal with family and to deal with livelihood issues. And from the harm that they've endured from atrocities that they've experienced or atrocities that they've witnessed during the conflict. These counseling and psychosocial services have been crucial and instrumental in the recovery of victims. Under material support, we provide important livelihood support to victims that have lost everything during the conflict because of attacks on their homes and villages that have caused displacement, destructions of their home or property. They have been abducted, they've lost education and livelihood opportunities. We support improved agriculture techniques, village savings and loan associations, income generation activities, and vocational training to help victims recover from the economic and material harm that they suffered as a result of crimes during the conflict. These are life-changing services that afford victims a degree of justice, that affords victims justice for the crimes that they have endured and as they make their way towards recovery. Many victims have stated that rehabilitation for their injury and help from the trust fund is a form of justice for them and their family. In many instances, the trust fund is the only organization providing these types of rehabilitation projects to victims in the situation. Without the TFE, more than 56,000 Ugandans would still be suffering or have perished due to their injuries. Assistance, however, is not humanitarian support. It is about vindicating victims' rights and rendering valuable assistance to victims before the ICC. Now this year, as Peter asked about, COVID-19. Uganda is the longest continuous running program, assistance program at the Trust Fund, though 2020 has been a challenge. The TFE and our terrific partners in Uganda have changed how we operate to continue as many services as possible with respect to very limiting COVID-19 prevention protocols that have been instituted by the government here. Many of the counseling services this year have continued through telephones for victims and first responders. Outreach and messaging through radio has increased. Unfortunately, surgical interventions have been postponed or delayed because hospitals and clinics were conserving beds and resources to deal with COVID-19. However, some outreach and individualized services have continued through mobile units that are able to visit individuals or victims individually in their community under protective protocols. Our partners have adjusted their methods of operation and adopted distancing protocols, use of protective personal equipment, reduced the size of their groups' activities, and increased the number of staff to compensate for the smaller group sizes. So they've changed their way they operate to ensure that these activities continue and ensure that they are able to reach out to as many victims as possible. In the near future, as we work to put COVID-19 behind us, our projects will enter what's called a catch-up phase in 2021. Our partners will increase the tempo of their activities to provide services that had been either postponed or delayed from 2020. Your continued financial support is absolutely worth it and necessary for victims in situations without which would continue on in their suffering. And I'd like to thank you all for your attention. Apoyo. Peter, back to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Scott, for telling the experience from Uganda in the past and as well as in the past year and how to go forward. I was hoping to invite Gizita Forgue, our program manager in the DRC, to answer my last question, but it appears that there's a communication problem through which she cannot join. So I'm afraid that question and answer will have to be in the report, and I can go on to the debate. And in a way, that's good because we don't have that much time left for questions and observations. So without any further delay, I'd like perhaps first to invite the representative of Sweden, Deputy Director, please. If you are here, haven't seen you yet.
Can you see me now?
You can say yes, please.
Can you see me now? Hello.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much.
And you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, excellencies, my name is Christine and I work here at the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs at the ICC desk. We are honored to co-sponsor this event with the Government of Ireland. I am new at this position and these issues, I must say that I've been very impacted by this important work that you do at the Trust Fund for Victims, and thank you in particular for all these impacting stories from the field. As has been pointed out before me, comprehensive justice involves not only holding perpetrators to account for their crimes, but also having a victim-centered approach. In order to make justice meaningful for victims of atrocity crimes, the Rome Statute provides for reparative justice for victims. This is achieved not only by giving victims a voice during proceedings through their representatives, but also through the reparations and assistance provided by the fund. As Ambassador Kelly underlined, the Trust Fund relies on voluntary contributions to fulfill its mandates. Sweden has been the largest contributor to the Trust Fund with a total of contributions of approximately 9.2 million euros, 3 million euros for 2019 to 2021. And Sweden also welcomes the new strategic plan of the fund and that gender equality is a key principle and cross-cutting issue. It is our assessment that the Trust Fund's implementing partners adopt a gender-sensitive approach throughout the design, implementation, and monitoring of projects, and that the Trust Fund recognizes the importance of involving men and boys in the work for gender equality. Whereas ambitions are high, the Trust Fund has, however, acknowledged that gender analysis capacity of its implementing partners needs to be strengthened. Sweden welcomes the report of the independent experts and as has been pointed out before me, it is encouraging to hear all the positive reactions in general, and as regards the recommendations directed to the fund, we look forward to supporting the fund in the implementation phase. Thank you very much.
Peter, you're still muted.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I was talking too much already. Let me go back here then. Thank you so
Peter,
much.
you're on mute.
I'm unmuted, no? Yes. Thank you so much for Christina from Sweden for joining in and for your contribution to this side event. As you mentioned, indeed, Sweden has been a most important and indeed the major donor of the Trust Fund over the past years. We've been always working very closely with SIDA. We have had a very good meeting with annual policy meeting with SIDA a few weeks ago, and we hope to be able to continue this important partnership relation in the next few years. I'd like now to open a debate. Anybody who'd like to ask a question or to make an observation, please report yourself in the chat function. And while this is happening, maybe if I can invite one of the other board members, Ms. Minu Tavares, if she is still with us, to say a couple of words, please. And if not, because she may have left already for the assembly, then the floor is completely open for participants to join. With so many people participating, I can't imagine there's nobody who wants to say something.
Nous avons tellement de participants, je ne peux pas imaginer qu'il n'y ait personne qui souhaite prendre la parole.
Voilà.
I see Yael. Yael, you want to take the
Yes,
floor?
I would like to ask a question, and anybody can answer. The distinction was made between humanitarian aid and reparative programs. At the same time, you're speaking about implementing partners. Are the implementing partners, do they view their work as humanitarian aid, or do they view their work as reparative? Again, I know it's a complex question. I've been giving it a great deal of thought for many years, but I'd like to, because you have reported so many interesting reparative interventions, I'd like to know how all of you formulate the distinction in your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Yael. That's a very good question, and not an easy one, but I think a very good one. I'd like perhaps to invite my colleagues from the field, Scott and Aude, to give brief answers, please, so that we can have other questions, but to give your perspective. Scott, can you go first, please?
Yes, Yael, yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, absolutely. Many of our partners are experienced non-governmental organizations, and they have had humanitarian programs or development projects. However, their implementation of our project, they do view it differently because they are working with different types of victims and have a different process for who they work with and why they work with them or why they select them as a beneficiary in the project. And so for them, they do see a big difference, and the victims in the project do see these sorts of projects as very different. Many victims during the conflict have had experience with WFP or UNHCR or some USAID program or DFID, but the Trust Fund program is different to the victims, but also to the organizations. For example, I mean, humanitarian assistance does not provide corrective surgery to repair facial mutilations from having your nose or your ear cut off, or an amputee having lost a leg in a conflict, or, in-depth trauma counseling to deal with, years of abduction or whatever the case may be. So many of the participants and our partners do view it very differently than humanitarian assistance programs that they have been involved in themselves. They understand in many cases that our programs and our services are connected to kind of the justice mission of the Rome Statute or the ICC, and so they do have a different kind of sense when they're participating in these projects for why they were selected. They were selected as a victim of a crime with an injury that we can rehabilitate today. And when they undergo that process, it is very different than getting plastic sheeting from UNHCR or food from WFP for them. They do view it as different. Thank you.
Scott, Aude, please, from your perspective.
Thank you, Peter. It's a very important question because, for example, in Mali, you have a number of humanitarian actors intervening in the same area where we can be working. So it's very important to have the possibility to distinguish for the victim to know that we are responding to the harm. I would say that maybe three elements. First is that we are trying, so in Mali, to work with a consortium of organizations to ensure that we will have a human right-based approach as well as a harm approach, meaning that we need the competencies in terms of delivery of services, such as psychological support or economic support. So you need this type of competencies. But at the same time, you need to have someone already in contact with the victim. So you need to work with the victim association who are on a daily basis and in the field with the victim. And it's very important to collaborate with human rights partners too, because they have been doing a lot of documentation and work in the field, and they are able to tell us if this incident has been qualified as a crime within the competence of the International Criminal Court. So it's really working with different actors to ensure that we will be responding to harm of crimes within the competence International Criminal Court. And the second element would be that the trust fund, yes, we transfer money to the implementing partner, but we are not a donor. We are here to accompany and really to bring the technicity and to frame the project as reparative justice. And so we are here on a daily basis with the implementing partner, with the victim association, with the civil society, to ensure that the project will be shaped as reparative justice and not as humanitarian assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Aude. I hope, Yael, that this gives you a bit of insight, and obviously we'll always be happy to discuss about this later. I'm just wanting to see if there's anybody else in the meeting who would like to step forward and perhaps ask a question, make a comment, make an observation. We still have a bit of time. I think we can go until 3 o'clock. Anything you would like to say or now will still be possible to take on board. All right, if we have no further volunteers, we're still being patient with you, but if there's no volunteers, we are nearing 2:45, which was the end time of this meeting. I do hope that the information and presentations that we have been giving to you have been of value to the participants. Again, recording of this event will be made available once it's been edited. As soon as we can, and at the same time we hope to be able to produce a report on this meeting with the major elements of the speaking points of today, so that also those who were not in a position to participate because of other meetings or engagements will be able to take note of it, because it will be published in the public domain as well. And with that, I would like to thank the speakers of today, Ambassador Kali, the chair, Mama Kwate Doumbia, the representative of Sweden, Christina, for their contributions, and my colleagues, obviously, Francisca, Scott, and Aude. It's a pity that we couldn't have Gizita, but we'll keep that for another occasion. I'd like to thank the team for preparing for this event. A lot of work went into that as well. Really appreciate that. And I think that's about it for today, because people will need to move on to the General Assembly and to other matters. And we're very grateful to have had you on board today. So with that, I think it's appropriate now to close the meeting and to thank you for your interest and for your participation. Thank you so much.